Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, A Holistic Approach to Reopening Agency Offices, sponsored by Force 3 on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. Today we're doing something a little different. We're hearing from the Homeland Security Department and how they're planning to reopen their offices. My guests from the Homeland Security Department are Angela Bailey, the Chief Human Capital Officer, Karen Evans, the Chief Information Officer, Tom Chalecki, the Chief Readiness Support Officer, and Rich McComb, the Chief Security Officer, all from the Homeland Security Department. We're also joined by Eric Stahl, the Director of Networking and Security at Force 3, and Joe Lazaro, the Collaboration Practice Manager, also at Force 3. At the end of that last segment, we started talking about the plans to reopen and how to get employees back safely, make sure they're productive. Angie, let me turn to you because I think something you brought up earlier on is really this is a people problem. The technology is great, the processes are great, but really it's about getting people comfortable and ensuring that all their needs are met, like you mentioned childcare. So talk about how you guys started to develop those reopening plans.
Sure, I'm glad to do so, Jason. So that we took a multi-pronged approach to this, but there's a few things that we made sure that we got out to all of the leadership so that they could really kind of take this into consideration. For one of the first things that we do is regarding the virus itself, we make sure that always we update and provide to leadership the latest CDC guidance, right? With regard to it, for example, if somebody is exposed in the workforce, how long should they quarantine? How long should they isolate? When should they be able to come back to work? We also did this, by the way, for not just for those that are in an office environment, but we also provided that guidance with regard to those that are on the front lines and are in mission critical positions who really, quite frankly, have to work, continue to work. And so that was one of the first things that we did was set the stage. We always make sure that that CDC guidance is up to date. Next, we talked about, we just recently have put together for contact tracing. So as people do come back into the workforce, we want to make sure that if there is an exposure situation, that we know exactly what the scripts are, who's going to make the contact of the people, who's going to follow up. With the help of Karen's team, we were able to make sure that we worked with OMB to hit all the privacy wickets and stuff so that we can also, quite frankly, capture the contractors, because it's not just about a federal workforce. We have contractors who sit side by side with our federal employees as well. So we always wanted to make sure that we were able to address our whole workforce and not just the federal employees. We provided guidance with regard to social distancing. What is social distancing? How do you actually conduct social distancing? Tom talked about it a little bit earlier about the cohorts. Those cohorts were actually built off of the guidance that came out of how you would appropriately do social distancing. And then face coverings. We covered as well, like when you'll wear them, where you'll wear those face coverings. We did not make things mandatory. We made them recommendations, but they're strongly encouraged. And people, quite frankly, are doing their part and they're actually wearing their face coverings. We spend a lot of time explaining why wearing a face covering is important, not just for themselves, but to protect not only their colleague, but their fellow citizens as well. So we made sure that as we were going through and addressing the come back to work guidance, that we addressed all the key factors that would actually make it viable for our employees to be able to come back to work. And then we, of course, mapped that against the phases. And as Karen was explaining, each of the cities, the states, everybody has a different way of how they're interpreting not only the phase, but we had what's called gating criteria. And so in working with HHS, we were able to put together a dashboard for Tom's team, and I can't remember who else's team that we worked with, but in particular with Tom's team. We put together all kinds of gating and phasing criteria that our components can tap into, and they can look at any one point in time. They can pick a city, they can pick a zip code, they can pick where their buildings are, and they can know exactly what phase or gate that particular locale is in. And then given that, they then have, the different steps in which they can then make a local decision with regard to bringing their workforce back in. So we did a whole comprehensive look at this. We're really quite proud of all the work that DHS has done on this, and I know that we've shared it with a lot of federal agencies as well, because I think one of the coolest things that we did of all is that we made it very visual. So almost everything is done in pictures with very, very few words. And so by doing that, we were able to reach multiple audiences and make it really clear for folks. We then went one step further and put that on our employee resource page, which is public. And that allows all of our family members to be able to have access to this information as well, and to be able to see how this all interconnects between smart practices at work means smart practices at home. Because it does us no good whatsoever if we protect folks at work and at home they disregard all of that. So we tried to make sure that they saw this as being treated as whole person in the whole situation in order to bring our folks back to work safely.
One of the things that Angela said was about contact tracing. I think that's been a huge challenge among a lot of different organizations, whether public or private sector. How's the contact tracing working from or how hopefully it will work?
Well, what I think from our perspective, from the security element, as Tom alluded to earlier a little bit, we can, use today the access control capabilities that we have to figure out who's in spaces. Obviously, as Angie mentioned, contact tracing we've had, unfortunately, within my area, we've had, a number of folks who have tested positive, and we've gone through that process of kind of, I'll say, the old-fashioned contact tracing, and it seems to have worked well. I think some of the lessons learned we've had is doing it quickly, making the notifications very quickly, and in the case of where you have a customer front-facing element that may have had somebody positive, is communicating with your customers in a very succinct way. So we've been able to do that, and obviously we look forward to the continued improvements that the department's going to bring on board to help us make that even faster than it has been. The good news, as Angie alluded to, our employees, I think, have been very compliant. They have not come to work if they feel sick. Obviously, we do know some people are asymptomatic, but by and large, I think our workforce has been very compliant and really, at least from a headquarters perspective, certainly minimized our need to do a lot of that, I think. One of the things that I will mention, when it comes to the facilities, we did look at thermal screening, taking people's temperatures, part of the entry control process. We provided some broad guidance for the department. Once again, one size doesn't fit all. So some folks are telling people to take their temperatures before they leave home. Some locations, particularly where you have a high density of folks, they're doing touchless IR thermometers prior to coming into the space. We're doing some of that. And then out at the headquarters, we implemented a thermal imaging technology that's really a kind of a self-service. It's a kiosk. You walk up, it takes your temperature, and then we'll issue you a pass, if you will, that indicates that you were below the threshold, the CDC recommended threshold, as far as temperature screening. And it's worked very well. We've gone through several iterations, but we believe that this is a more sustainable approach. It's not been mandated or directed that the department do it, but it's certainly provides us a good model, and we've been able to handle the throughput for the headquarters, and we think we'll be able to even handle more as more individuals come to work. And it provides the workforce, I think, not only a real check on the symptom, but also a sense of safety that the department really is looking for the workforce to make sure they stay safe and secure.
All right, Tom, jump in, because we got about a minute or so, a minute and a half. So give me about 30 seconds, and I want to get in Joe and or Eric one last comment.
Sure thing. So, we built, Angie's plan was the foundation, and really there's 6 key points that we focus on, which was prepare the workforce, prepare the facility, which is in our lane, control access, social distancing plan, reduce touch points, and then communicate for confidence. And really the bottom line is the key thing. And the struggle here is the enterprise DHS focus, which is the policy, and then the local execution. In logistics, we have a principle of centralized planning, decentralized execution, and that's really what this is going to come down to. My offices are open. Angie mentioned the social psychological impacts of this. If folks need to go in and have those face-to-face meetings, they can do it, and they can do it safely. I'm confident of that. Or we can continue telework. I mean, the office is open, but the schools aren't. And I have folks that flat out cannot go into the office, and that's okay too, because we're able to do the mission as we build it right now. So bottom line is, Jason, we reserve the right to get smarter. This thing evolves. We're going to evolve with it. And primarily it's keep our workforce safe and do the DHS mission. Over.
All All right, Joe, Eric, you get about 30 seconds or less. Future, you heard what DHS said. What's the future going to look like? What should agencies keep in mind as they go forward? Give me one thing they should keep in mind. I know it's hard.
It's just, I guess, shortly, I think Angie mentioned the human element. So I think a technology island is bad. Multiple islands is worse. So as people return to work, marrying up your existing systems with these newly instantiated working from home systems, do they work together? What's the user experience? What training is involved? User adoption? It's all questions that have to be asked and explored.
All right, and unfortunately we are out of time, so we will ask and explore those questions maybe another time. But first, let me thank my guests for joining us today. From the Homeland Security Department, we had Angela Bailey, the Chief Human Capital Officer, Karen Evans, the Chief Information Officer, Tom Chalecki, the Chief Readiness Support Officer, and Rich McComb, the Chief Security Officer. We were also joined by Eric Stahl, the Director of Networking and Security at Force 3, and Joe Lazaro, the Collaboration Practice Manager, also at Force 3. Everyone, thank you so much for taking the time today. You've been listening to the panel discussion, A Holistic Approach to Reopening Agency Offices, sponsored by Force 3 on Federal News Network. I've been your host, Jason Miller. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Force 3.